I don't go in the woods anymore. I don't mean I don't hunt. I don't mean I don't hike or fish or wander. I mean I don't step beneath the tree line, not for any reason, not for money, not for pride, not for God himself leaning down and pointing. I learned that lesson outside Richlands, Virginia, late summer of '68, on a night that started like every other bad decision I ever made and ended like something the world should not have allowed. I was 25, maybe 26, old enough to know better, young enough to think I was different, thought I knew the woods, thought the woods knew me. I owed money, that's the long and short of it, owed it to a man who didn't yell and didn't threaten and didn't ever forgive. The kind that'd smile and ask after your mama while figuring how much of you he could afford to break. I was short after a busted run earlier that month. Fire burned wrong, mash soured, jars cracked on the hall. You can make excuses all day, but debt don't care. So I told myself it was just one more night, one more run. I had a spot up a hollow I'd used before, fed by a little spring that stayed cold even in August. Nothing fancy, quiet, hidden. I'd walked it enough times I could have done it blind. That's important, because I didn't. I parked the truck a ways off and finished on foot, pack digging into my shoulders, copper pieces wrapped and quiet. The woods were thick but familiar, oak, hickory, laurel, choking the ground so tight it felt like pushing through something that didn't want you there. I noticed the buck before I heard anything else. He stood just off the trail, maybe 30 yards out, broadside and still as if he'd been carved there. Big-bodied, heavy in the chest, neck thick even for the season. Antlers tall and clean, catching what little moonlight made it through the leaves. I stopped. Not because he spooked me. Deer don't usually. They bolt or they stare dumb and twitchy. This one didn't do either. He looked at me like he was waiting. His eyes were wrong. Not glowing, not red, just aware. Focused in a way animals usually aren't. Like he wasn't seeing a shape or a movement, but me exactly. I told myself that was foolishness. Long day, long worry, debt riding my back. I shifted my pack and made a little noise on purpose, expecting him to bound off. He didn't. He took one slow step forward. That's when the hair went up on my arms. Not fear yet. Just that animal part of you whispering that something ain't following the rules. I eased my hand down and picked up a rock, tossed it off to the side. It landed soft in the leaves. The buck didn't even glance at it. He tilted his head instead. Not curious, calculating. I remember thinking, clear as anything, that if he charged, I wouldn't have time to run. Then, like he'd made his point, he turned and walked back into the trees. Not hurried, not alarmed, just gone. I stood there a long second before breathing again. I should have turned around then. Should have gone back to the truck. Debt be damned. But I didn't. Because I'd seen deer before. Because men like me always think the world owes us mercy. I finished the walk to the still with my nerves humming, every snap of twig sounding too loud. The spot was how I'd left it. Fire pit cold, cap tucked where it should be, worm clean and coiled. I set to work quiet and steady, hands doing what they knew how to do. I didn't light up right away. Let the woods settle. Let the night come back down around me. That's when I heard him again. A step, heavy. Not a deer's careful placement, but something putting weight where it wanted to. Then another, circling, slow. I stood and turned, heart starting to drum. "Get," I said, soft but firm. The steps stopped. Then came a sound I had never heard from a deer before or since. Not a snort, not a bleat. A low, wet huff. Almost a laugh. I backed up without meaning to, heel catching a root, pack shifting wrong. I caught myself, but the noise was enough. The buck burst from the trees. He didn't charge straight. He angled, smart, fast, antlers low, eyes locked. I ran. Branches tore at my arms and face as I bolted through the dark, breath ripping out of me in harsh pulls. I heard him behind me, close enough I could feel the ground shudder when he struck it. I tripped and went down hard, pain blooming in my knee. I rolled just as antlers sliced through the space my head had been, close enough to feel the wind of it. He wheeled on me immediately. I scrambled up, grabbed a fallen limb, and swung without thinking. It cracked against his skull with a sound like splitting wood. He didn't flinch. He rammed me. The hit lifted me clean off my feet and slammed me into a tree so hard stars burst behind my eyes. I slid down the trunk, gasping, ribs screaming. He came again. I threw myself sideways and felt antler points rake my back, hot and tearing. Something wet soaked my shirt. Pain didn't come yet, just pressure and heat. I crawled, blind, desperate. His hoof came down on my calf and crushed. I screamed then, couldn't stop it. White pain exploded through my leg as bone gave way with a sound I'll hear until I die. The buck pulled back, head cocked, watching me writhe. That was the worst part. Not the pain, the watching, like he wanted to see how much I had left. I grabbed a rock and hurled it. Missed. Another. Missed again. He stepped forward, and I knew, lying there in the dirt with blood slick under my hands, that the woods were done with me. Pain has a way of sharpening things. At first it was just white noise, loud enough to drown out thought. Then it settled into something clearer, hot, pulsing, specific. My left leg wouldn't answer me at all. It lay twisted wrong, boot filling with warmth I didn't want to think about. The buck stood over me, close enough now I could smell him. Not the usual sharp animal stink. This was heavier, old, like wet earth that had gone bad. I dragged myself backward with my elbows, every pull scraping skin, breath coming in short, ugly sounds. He followed one step at a time, matching me. Not rushing, not unsure. I remember begging, not loud, not proud, just a low, cracked sound falling out of my mouth. "Please," I said to a deer. He flicked an ear. That broke something in me. I reached out blindly and my hand closed on a rock half buried in the dirt, slick with my blood. I hurled it with everything I had left. It caught him square on the nose. He snorted, more annoyed than hurt, and lunged. I rolled downhill and vanished into the laurel. Branches clawed at me as I slid, tore my shirt opened my back again. My broken leg slammed into roots and rocks, each hit sending lightning up my spine. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste copper, so I wouldn't scream again. I heard him crashing after me, not slipping, not stumbling, keeping pace. The slope leveled out near the creek. I splashed into it, cold water shocking the breath out of me. I dragged myself through the shallows, letting the current smear my blood, hoping, stupidly, that instinct might buy me something. I crawled up the opposite bank and collapsed behind a fallen log, chest heaving, hands shaking so bad I could barely keep my mouth covered. Silence. Seconds stretched thin as wire. Then, slow, deliberate steps in the water. He didn't follow the trail I'd made. He waded upstream, downstream, then stopped. I heard the water still. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might give me away. The steps started again, coming straight toward me. He cleared the log with an easy hop. I don't know how I found the strength. Terror gives you things pain takes away. I lurched up and swung the heavy end of the log like a club, catching him across the shoulder. This time, he reacted. He staggered, hooves skidding in the mud, and I took that moment, just that, to drag myself into the brush again. I didn't run, I pulled. One arm, one good leg, over and over. Leaves packed into my mouth. Thorns tore my hands. I didn't care. Behind me, I heard him breathe. Not chase breath, not panic, measured, steady, close. I realized then he wasn't trying to kill me quick. He was hurting me. I came out of the brush onto a narrow old logging cut, half reclaimed, ground smoother than the woods around it. I tried to turn downhill toward where I knew the road should be, but he stepped into view, blocking it, antlers spread wide, chest heaving, eyes bright and fixed. He lowered his head and stomped once. No bluff in it, just instruction. I went the other way. The cut twisted and dipped, rocks slick under leaf mold. My strength was bleeding out of me, every movement slower than the last. My vision tunneled, edges going dark. I heard something ahead, metal, rusted. I dragged myself into an old shed collapsed in on itself, tin roof sagging low. Coal equipment maybe, abandoned before I was born. I squeezed inside and pressed myself flat against the dirt. The buck circled outside, hooves crunching on tin scraps. He nudged the wall once, testing, snorted again, that wet sound, closer to a chuckle than any animal noise had a right to be. Then, silence. I waited. Counted breaths. lost count. Minutes passed. Maybe more. I let myself hope. That's when the antlers punched through the wall. Tin screamed as it tore, sharp edges ripping open. One tine slid past my face, close enough to brush my cheek. I scrambled backward, hands slipping, and he tore the shed open like paper. Roof collapsed in with a crash, dust choking me. He charged. I rolled under him as he struck, felt a hoof slam into my ribs, heard something crack. Air fled my lungs in a dry wheeze. He turned faster than I thought possible and hooked my shoulder, lifting me, slamming me back down. My arm went numb. I lay there gasping, tasting dirt and blood, staring up at a sky that looked too calm to belong to the same world. The buck stood over me again. I saw it then, clear as day. A scar along his flank, old and puckered. A notch in one ear. This wasn't his first time, not his first man. Something in his eyes shifted, not hunger, satisfaction. I fumbled at my belt with my good hand and found the small knife I carried more out of habit than use. I gripped it tight. When he lowered his head, I drove it up into the soft place under his jaw. The blade sank in deep. Hot blood poured over my hand. He screamed, a sound so wrong I felt it in my teeth. He reared back, wrenching free, antlers ripping my shoulder open. I screamed too, pain roaring back in full. He stumbled, shaking his head, blood spraying dark in the moonlight. I didn't wait. I crawled. Every inch felt like miles. My world narrowed to dirt and breath and pain. Behind me, I heard him recover, heard the steps start again. But slower now, angrier. The trees thinned ahead. I smelled something new. Oil, asphalt, the road. Hope flared, thin and dangerous. The woods weren't done with me yet. I could hear the road before I could see it. At first it was just a hum, so low I thought it was in my head. Then it resolved into something real, the distant sigh of tires, the occasional rush of wind pushed aside by passing metal. Civilization. Indifference. The world going on without any knowledge of the bargain I was trying to claw my way back into. I dragged myself through the last stretch of brush on my elbows and one good heel, every movement slower than the last. My broken leg had gone numb in a way that scared me more than the pain had. My hands were slick and shaking, fingers cramping when I tried to grip the dirt. Behind me, I heard him. Not close, not far, patient. Each step landed heavy and sure. No hesitation now, no testing. He knew where I was headed. He knew I couldn't move any faster than this. The trees thinned, and I broke out onto a narrow gravel shoulder, the road just a few yards away. Moonlight washed over the asphalt, pale and flat. Route 460, though I didn't know it by number then, just a strip of black promise cutting through the dark. I collapsed there, half in the weeds, half on the stones, chest heaving so hard my vision blurred. A truck passed. It roared by, close enough I felt the wind of it tug at my shirt. And then it was gone, taillights shrinking into red dots. It didn't slow, didn't swerve, didn't even tap the brakes. I laughed then, a thin crack sound that hurt my ribs. Because of course it didn't stop. Why would it? To that truck, I was just another smear of shadow at the edge of the road. I tried to pull myself farther out, to make myself visible. My arm gave out and I slammed face first into the gravel. Skin tore. Teeth clicked together, hard enough I thought they'd shatter. That's when the buck stepped out of the woods. He came through the tree line slow and proud, moonlight catching on his antlers, blood still dark and wet along his neck where I'd stabbed him. He looked smaller than he had in the woods somehow, but only because there was nothing close around him to compare. On open ground, you could see how wide he was, how solid. He stopped just short of the asphalt. Cars and trucks rushed by, their noise filling the air, their lights flashing over him again and again. He didn't flinch, didn't spook, didn't even look. His eyes were on me. I scrabbled backward, dragging myself onto the road inch by inch, stones biting into my palms. A horn blared somewhere down the line. Tires hissed. I raised one bloody arm and waved it weakly. "Help," I croaked, though it came out barely louder than a breath. The buck stepped forward. One hoof touched the asphalt, then another. He tilted his head, studying the surface like it was something new and mildly interesting. He stomped once, testing. The sound cracked sharp and loud, different from dirt and leaf. He seemed to like it. He came for me then. I rolled onto my back, vision swimming, knife slipping from my numb fingers. I had nothing left. No trick, no strength. Just the road, the night, and this thing that had decided I didn't belong anymore. Headlights flared in my peripheral vision. A truck came around the bend too fast, engine loud and angry, grille bright as a wall. The driver laid on the horn, a long, blaring sound that cut through everything. The buck turned, not in panic, in annoyance. He squared himself to the truck, hooves planted, head lowering. I remember thinking, this is it. He's going to charge that now. Whatever lives in these woods doesn't care about our rules at all. The truck never slowed. There was a moment, a perfect, awful moment, where the buck stood fully in the lane, antlers outlined in white light, blood steaming faintly in the cool night air. Then the world exploded. Metal hit meat with a sound like a cannon going off. The buck was lifted clean off the ground, body folding and twisting in the air in a way nothing living should ever do. Antlers shattered against the hood, one tine punching through the windshield in a spray of glass. The truck skidded, tires screaming, sparks flying as it jackknifed and slammed into the guardrail. The sound echoed off the hills and then fell away into stunned silence. I lay there, unmoving, staring at the empty space where the buck had been. His body landed hard on the far shoulder, rolling once, twice, then coming to rest in a twisted heap. One leg bent backward, neck broken at an angle that made my stomach lurch. Blood pooled dark and thick beneath him, steaming now for real. For a long second, I thought he might get up. I waited for it, for the head to lift, for the eyes to find me again. They didn't. The driver stumbled out of the cab, swearing, hands shaking, staring at the ruin of his truck and the ruin of the animal with equal disbelief. He didn't look at me at first, didn't even notice. I laughed again. Then I passed out. I woke up in a hospital with white walls and a ceiling that smelled like bleach. My leg was in traction, my shoulder wrapped tight, my ribs bandaged. Tubes ran out of me like I was more machine than man. A trooper came by later, notebook in hand, asking questions in a voice that assumed I was drunk or stupid or both. I told him I'd been attacked by a deer. He nodded the way men do when they've already decided what they're going to write down no matter what you say. The truck driver came too. He was pale, eyes haunted. He said he'd never seen a deer stand like that, never seen one face a truck. Like it was mad at me, he said, like it meant to fight. They told me the buck was big, biggest they'd seen pulled off the road in years. Game warden came out, shook his head, said something about sickness or bad luck or too much time around people. They buried it somewhere, burned parts. I don't know. I didn't ask. I spent weeks in that bed, months learning how to walk right again, longer learning how to sleep. Sometimes in the half-light before morning, I'd hear hooves on asphalt. I'd smell wet earth and blood. I'd wake up clawing at the sheets, heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I paid my debt. Not with money. I never went back for the still, never went back into that hollow, never stepped into the woods again, not even in daylight with other men around. People ask why sometimes, why I won't hunt, why I won't walk past the tree line. I tell them the woods remember, and sometimes, when I'm driving that stretch of road near Richlands late at night, I swear I see antlers just beyond the shoulder, watching traffic pass, waiting for something that doesn't come anymore. And I keep driving. I always keep driving.